More than 4 months and about 4,000 political roadblocks since she was nominated, Suffolk County DA Rachel Rollins was confirmed as the new U.S. Attorney from Massachusetts by the full Senate today. Every member of the Democratic caucus voted yes, every Republican voted no, and Vice President Kamala Harris cast the tiebreaker.
The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative, and the nomination is confirmed.
In her new role, Rollins will have the power to pursue the reforms she began in Boston from a new angle, with white-collar crime, public corruption, and civil rights cases all in her purview. Her appointment is just one element of the Biden administration's efforts to tackle anti-democratic norms across the country and around the world. Tomorrow, the president will host leaders from countries around the globe in the first of a 3-day summit for democracy. Attendees include leaders from countries where freedoms are most at risk, including Pakistan, the Philippines, Belarus, and Taiwan. Predictably, China has condemned Biden for the last invitation. Among the summit's goals is addressing the financial corruption behind authoritarianism, an issue recently put in the spotlight by the Pandora Papers, the findings of a coalition of journalists who discovered trillions of dollars in hidden assets from some of the world's most powerful people, which was the subject of a recent Frontline documentary.
We're talking about people who have been in all kinds of trouble, accused of some very bad things, who are using this system to hide their wealth.
It's something my next guest, a longtime crusader against such financial schemes, plans to tackle in a new bill, which would require American financial institutions to do more to keep bad actors from hiding their money right here in the U.S. That'd be Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island. Senator, it's good to see you again.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
So you're a former U.S. attorney. It's been more than 50 years since there was a roll call vote on a nomination for a person to be U.S. attorney. Rachel Rollins got 73% of the vote a couple of years ago from the people who know her best, not one vote from Republicans. Why?
Well, I think the nominations process in the Senate has broken down under the pressure of politics. And we find individual Republican senators each having their own crusades against different sectors of the Biden administration to slow down and block nominees. And each one of them is a likely presidential candidate. So there's quite a good deal of posturing involved here. And the result is ambassadors who would ordinarily be cleared by agreement, U.S. attorneys who would ordinarily be cleared in block votes or other simple procedural methods are forced to go through every possible procedural step. And the ultimate goal is, the vanity of the individuals who are doing the blockading, but also it requires Democrats to sacrifice floor time that we could otherwise spend on legislation in order to get these people through. So it makes more difficult for Democrats to legislate when they do this. And I guess that's just an irresistible twofer right now.
Apparently is after 50 years. So you wrote a piece in the Boston Globe the other day about the Summit for Democracy, which I have to admit I hadn't heard about until I read your piece, and I thank you for that. What do you hope can come from such a meeting where people like the murderous leader of the Philippines, Duterte, the climate-destroying Trump wannabe, Bolsonaro from Brazil, are in attendance? What could possibly come out of this?
Well, I think the important thing to come out of it is, first, an international understanding that this is a global national security issue. I view us as being in a clash of civilizations between rule of law and kleptocracy, autocracy, and criminality. And one of the ways in which we lose that struggle is when we allow our rule of law assets to protect the ill-gotten gains of the kleptocrats, the autocrats, and the criminals. And so there's some really specific stuff that we can do to make sure that in the world's financial system, you can't hide behind shell corporations and fake names, and we actually know who you are, so that when somebody is in the business of looting their country or running a major international criminal enterprise, they can't get away with their money and hide it safely in the protection of our rule of law system. That would be a very, very big and significant step. And if we can take that together, then we can sort out who the greatest evildoers are separately from that.
And we should say one of the depositories are not just exotic islands. They're places like South Dakota, right here in the United States of America. But you know, in your op-ed, you used the term, you just used kleptocracy, criminality, authoritarianism. What authority does the U.S. have when we just had a leader who had all three of those characteristics, and if an election was today, and polls are correct, I'm serious, would be the leader of this country again? What moral authority do we have to speak on this?
It hurt us and it set us back to have that person be our president. But it doesn't change the structural facts on the ground that the United States is in a contest with anti-rule of law forces around the world, and that in that contest, the ground rules matter. And the ground rules right now support, aid and abet the bad guys on the other side by letting them hang on to their stolen wealth. And we support that, and we shouldn't support that. We should draw a really bright line. And if we do, I think it will damage the cause of kleptocracy and autocracy around the world. And that's to our benefit, even if we had an unfortunate president in the last 4 years who was more on the side of the kleptocrats and the autocrats than any American president should be.
So, Senator, let's move to your favorite subject, which we've discussed before. Here's a little bit of you during the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett.
I've never seen this around any court that I've ever been involved with, where there's this much dark money. Something is not right around the court. And dark money has a lot to do with it. Special interests have a lot to do with it.
Millions of dollars from unidentified sources going to support nominees that have led to this dramatic imbalance in the court that may lead to the gutting of Roe v. Wade and other things. As you know, yesterday, the President's Commission on the Federal Courts issued its report. No recommendations on things like expanding the court, term limits, retirement ages, et cetera. You were asked in April about expansion of the court, and you said, let's not put the cart before the horse. Is it not time to start moving that cart, at least on some of these issues, Senator?
Well, I'm devoting an enormous amount of effort to trying to show exactly how this court has been compromised. And so back to your earlier question about foreign countries, if we were giving advice to a foreign country, and the foreign country had given its judicial selection process over to a private partisan organization, while that private partisan organization was receiving enormous anonymous contributions from unknown interests, and was allowing other anonymous huge donations to fund political advertising to support those judicial nominees, we'd sit down with that country and say, you know, this is really bad practice. You should not allow this to happen. This is an open avenue for corruption. Unfortunately, it's happening to us in our own country. And my first job is to try to make sure people understand what is going on and how very, very distant it is from what is proper and what historic standards have been around the court. Once people understand that, then I think we're in a stronger position to make the case. But I feel a bit like the lawyer going in to ask for extraordinary relief from a judge. I'm reluctant to ask for the extraordinary relief until I'm confident that I have made my case.
Do any of those extraordinary relief measures have some appeal to you? Limiting terms, age, which ones?
Yep, I'm not going to get into that because my job in this struggle right now is to get the message out, to disclose to the American public what has happened here. And I don't want to be, they're already accusing me of being a court packer, even though I haven't said that, just as part of trying to discredit my work. So my work here, I think, comes first. I have supported a lot of simple transparency measures that I'd hope that the court would undertake. When somebody shows up to file a brief in the court and it's a phony front group, we ought to know who they're fronting for. Who funded them? Not complicated. Exactly like what we did for American shell corporations in the recent bill. Who's really behind you? Why do we set a standard for American shell corporations that you can show up in the Supreme Court and not have to meet? So we've got our work cut out for us. The easy, quick stuff is going to be the transparency and ethics reforms at the court. And we've got to build a consensus around what our solutions are going to be before I think we get way out ahead of our skis.
By the way, we call it court expansion here, not court packing, but nevertheless, Senator,
They say court packing, and it's interesting because that's really what they did by packing the court with 6 to 3 people chosen by special interests.
Can we move to one other critical issue that you have a role in as a senator, protecting voting rights in this country? Obviously, there are not Republicans' votes for such a thing as Republican legislatures disenfranchise certain voters back home. Chuck Schumer, leader of the Democrats, said to Joe Manchin, who doesn't like messing with a filibuster, we'll allow you to amend this bill. You can throw in voter ID information that makes you happy, you meaning Joe Manchin. Go get some Republicans. He got none. There are 50 votes at best, it seems to me, for voting rights, but only if the filibuster, there's a carve out for the filibuster. One, can you imagine him supporting it? And two, do you support a carve out for the filibuster to get this voting rights legislation passed?
We absolutely need a solution to this, because otherwise you give a minority party a veto over the government of the United States. And the basic operating principle of democracy is majority rule. So it's appropriate and consistent with the Senate's history and traditions to let the minority slow things down, to let them demand to see the case, to have public debate on it, to not be rolled over in the middle of the night. But they don't get to turn that into ruling from the minority. And that is what they're demanding right now, and it's not appropriate. There are ways short of eliminating the filibuster entirely to create a pathway for a bill like this to pass. And it could be things as simple as changing the speaking rules of the Senate floor, changing who bears the burden of being at the ready on the floor to hold off a quorum call. You know, there are these sort of technical matters, but if you line them up in the right way, you can restore majority rule in the Senate consistent with the Senate's principles. So we're trying to work our way through that right now.
Just so I'm clear, you would support such measures that would allow this voting rights legislation to pass with 50 votes plus one?
In a heartbeat.
Senator Whitehouse, it's good to see you as always. Good luck with your work.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.